Thanks for joining us today on the Big Blue Podcast. I'm Greg Stone, Metro Campus Provost, here with Dr. Leigh Goodson, our President and CEO. Hello, Dr. Goodson.
How are you, Provost Stone?
I'm well, and we're here today with Dr. Rob Katz, Associate Professor of Humanities and Music, and our current Faculty Association President. As a former FA President myself, Rob, let me say thank you for that great work, because it's a hard job and a really important job, as you well know. So I'm glad to have you here today to kind of talk about FA and then a little bit about yourself, too. When did you first become involved in Faculty Association? I feel like when I first started being a division rep, that you were one as well, or had been before that. What's your background with FA?
I don't think it was much before that.
Okay.
I think I'd been involved in a bunch of other activities at TCC, mainly sort of student-focused things at Southeast Campus. But I started attending meetings regularly as a rep probably 6 years ago.
Okay,
maybe.
yeah.
I can't remember exactly when it was, but it wasn't back when I first started, that's for sure. It took me a while to sort of work my way into involvement with FA.
You're pretty well worked into that now.
I think I definitely am worked into it now.
So I assuming, although maybe I'm incorrect, that you ended up being FA President in much the same way that many people do, which is, hey, let's go talk to Rob because he's really good, and someone would talk you into it, and then you agree to say yes in a moment of weakness, and everyone's thrilled that you said yes.
Yeah, it was. It's an interesting process. There are a lot of things in life where it feels like you've probably seen that image where it says everyone who's interested in this take one step forward, and everybody else takes one step back.
Right.
And you're left standing there. And it's like, oh, well, I guess it's me then. But no, but I was. The process is sort of an internal one rather than a purely electoral one. So people who are involved and who are paying attention know other people who are involved and paying attention. And so you sort of engage with them and see if there's interest. And, I think there's validity to that approach. And I also think that we need to address the whole election process when it comes to FA, because I think while there's validity to that approach, I think it also has limitations. And one of the things I'd like to see happen as a result of changing the electoral process is to bring more faculty into the process, because what happens the other way is that it's the same people who continue to.
Right.
So that you don't get a lot of turnover, you don't get a lot of diversity, and I'd like to see new faces, new ideas
Yep. Absolutely.
come into the process.
So Faculty Association's been around for a while, and so for new faculty or new employees, what would you tell them is the goal of Faculty Association, and what kind of work do you involve yourself in? So I know just a little bit about your work because we meet monthly, and all 4 faculty presidents are there, and you all have a list of questions, and I may have a list of things I want some feedback on, or I want to give you the heads up on. But beyond that, what kind of work is Faculty Association engaged in?
So your first question, I'll try to answer first.
I asked about
what
3 or
would
4
I do
questions.
with new faculty? Who is the Faculty Association? So I feel like Faculty Association is really the voice that we have collectively to express the needs, the concerns of the faculty to the administration. And we're actually grateful that we have the ability to meet, because there is no other formal process by which we do that. You can network your way into talking to people individually, but I don't think that's really the best or most effective way to get things done as the faculty. So the Faculty Association plays that role of bringing the concerns and the interests of the faculty to the administration. And so I would encourage new faculty to engage with Faculty Association for that reason, because it's in their own best interest. So if they're participating, they get to articulate their concerns from their perspective, and we can carry that forward to them as the leadership. So it's not like the whole Faculty Association comes to your office and sits there and waits for your responses to our questions, so the leadership gets to do that. And then what do I do as Faculty Association President? Well, it seems like I run from place to place talking to people about every imaginable thing that comes up with faculty from.
It is kind of all over the map
Yeah.
a little bit. When you come in with your questions, I notice how diverse the concerns are.
Yeah. So this morning I went to Southeast Campus. I don't teach on Wednesdays, but I went to meet with a faculty member. But then when I got to my office, that meeting I canceled because of a family crisis. But that was to talk about specific concerns related to one of the academic divisions in the college. And then I came here to talk to another faculty member who's a faculty chair to talk about concerns related to faculty chairs and how that is playing out in terms of the role of a faculty chair as a faculty member as compared to the role as a kind of administrator who has to oversee faculty, which is one of our new sort of levels of complexity at TCC. In some ways, I almost feel like a counselor because people are saying, help, do you have suggestions and can you help bring this issue to some type of resolution, or is there some way to deal with the challenge? So that's the sort of constant daily thing, getting emails from people who have questions about this and that. But, I'm also involved in other aspects. I'm very much involved in promotion and promotion in rank because...
As the FA president.
Right.
Yes.
And I was involved in it before, but I've been on the review committee, and then this year with Dr. Hess, we decided that it would be really helpful if we held workshops to help faculty who are eligible to be promoted to walk them through that process. And so right after this, I'm going to go and lead a workshop with faculty and another colleague who's been through the process also to help,
So that's interesting. You are vetting all these concerns and questions all the time. What percentage of those concerns and questions do you think end up in the meeting that we have once a month?
What percentage? I would say 70 to 80%.
Okay.
Because, when I talk to somebody, I take notes.
Right.
And then I meet with the other faculty association presidents. We talk about issues, and it's usually the things that we've all heard about because that's usually an indication that this is a more sort of global concern within the institution. And so, if it's someone's individual gripe or something, I'm probably not going to bring that to you. But if it's something that is significant enough that we think that you need to know, then we'll bring it to you. So it's a significant portion.
Interesting. It's when it's become a theme.
Right. You mentioned earlier wanting to look at the election process for FA officers. What are the other priorities that you have for this year? What are sort of the big items that FA as a body is looking at addressing or wanting to explore further?
Well, I started a couple of things at the beginning of the semester that I thought were important concerns for us to address. The election is important, and it's not just the election, it's the representation, right? So that with the reorganization of the college, we're no longer so campus-focused or even discipline-focused, but we're a school-focused. And so as things exist now, everything is by campus and then by discipline, but those things have sort of been diminished in their focus as far as the way the college is organized. So I think what we want to do, and there's a committee working on this is not my doing, but a committee is working on trying to develop an approach to a more sort of proportional representation from each of the schools. But in talking with other faculty, we're also concerned that each campus still has fair representation. So what we want to avoid have happen is, most of the faculty from Southeast and from Metro, because that's where the majority of our faculty are, outweigh those of the smaller campuses. So we want to have a fairly equitable distribution. So that's a kind of a tough issue to resolve because of how do you make those decisions and how do you build it into the system without it being overly rigid, right? So that's something that we'll be working on. another concern or another committee that we've formed and a bunch of people have come forward is responding to issues in faculty's lives. So, if someone suffers an illness or a loss of a family member, as faculty, I think we should be responding to that. We don't need to necessarily be going to everyone's house every time something happens, but people appreciate it when you receive a note or some flowers if there's a funeral, or even for happier occasions when maybe a child is born in a family or someone graduates. So I think something that I want the Faculty Association to become more responsive to is actually the real needs of the faculty, not just as classroom instructors, but as human beings working in an institution, so that we know each other, and then we know when one of us is hurting or when one of us is celebrating, that's something that we acknowledge as well. Because I think that is a way for us to make people feel better about working at TCC, right? And I think that's a role that we can play. So those are a couple of things. I'm sure there's other stuff on the docket as well.
I'm sure there is. I'm Leigh Goodson here with my co-host, Dr. Greg Stone, and you're listening to the Big Blue Podcast. Our guest today is Dr. Rob Katz, and we've been talking about the TCC Faculty Association. And so last fall, you attended Pathways with us. Yep, Dr. Hess and I have had the opportunity to go to every Pathways Institute because we're required, and we like it. But just so you know, we're not trying to hog it. We're required, okay? And so what was your experience? What was that experience like for you in terms of Pathways? How did you come in? And then, I mean, I think it's always good to have healthy skeptics. And just, Rob, you and I have talked about that. And that's a good place to be. How did you come into that institute? And then what, if anything, did it change about how you felt about Pathways when you left?
Well, I'm glad you brought up the healthy skeptic because
Of course.
I tend to be skeptical just because if I don't know what something is and they have the panacea, in a sense, we're going to solve the problems of the community college, I'm thinking, maybe not. So I really want to see what it's all about. So I came in thinking, not really knowing too much about it. I've read some of the book about transforming community colleges and still
redesigning America's community colleges by Davis Jenkins. Yeah.
No plug there. Are you getting?
I'm not getting anything from it. It's become the textbook. No, don't buy it. Come borrow a copy.
That's right.
Please.
They're just floating around.
They are just floating around now.
But I was interested in seeing, because part of what I was understanding was this was happening at the college, and if I can play a role in shaping it in some way that will make it responsive to my experience at the college and my colleagues' experience, then that is a positive, right? And so it's, we want to avoid this kind of fitting things into boxes because we like what the box looks like, but we need to be responsive to the unique characteristics of our institution. So going in, I was, wanting to find out more about what Pathways was really all about and how individualistic the approach to implementing it was. And I felt like I came away feeling positive in that I felt we could tailor the Pathways experience to our college. So I thought that was a positive. I appreciated the focus of our Pathways Institute was intake, I think, student intake in Denver. And they seemed to really acknowledge, two things that were important to me. One was there was a considerable amount of discussion when I got a chance to meet with other faculty from other colleges about challenges that our students face, non-cognitively as well as cognitively. The cognitive stuff we know about because we test our students and they bring their experience with them, and so we know what challenges exist academically. But we all know as faculty that many of the challenges that we face that are most serious in terms of student success is not what happens in the classroom or in the curriculum, but what happens outside the classroom. You know, that our students have all kinds of family challenges, financial challenges, you know, all sorts of other problems that impede their ability to complete and continue. So that is something that everyone expressed, and the recognition that that was a reality and that we need to deal with that was, well, it wasn't positive because the problems are quite serious, but it was positive in the sense that the acknowledgement was meaningful, that we need to keep that in mind when dealing with our students. The other thing was I went to a really great session on developmental education, and Robin Oz, who I guess is the president of the National Association of Developmental Education, gave a great presentation. And I went to her session. I immediately went to Cindy and said, we need to get Robin here to talk to our faculty because she has a sort of outside-the-box view of Dev Ed, which I think would be very meaningful for our faculty. And so, it's a great opportunity to interact with people who are trying to make community colleges better, and we're all trying to do that, right? Yeah. And so any chance to engage with people who are concerned about student success, concerned about the future of higher education, that's a good thing. Yep. So, does that answer your question?
It does. No, that was awesome.
You've been here on faculty since 1992,
Yes,
is that
I
correct?
started as an adjunct in 92.
92.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking before we started recording today about what brought your family to Tulsa, but what brought you to TCC?
I had a chance to teach classes in the area that I had my training. So it was a great chance to start teaching music to new students. And so my first classes were music appreciation classes and music theory classes, like fundamentals of theory. So beginning students, many students who didn't know how to read or write music at all. And so that was my introduction to the population of the community college, because I never went to community college as a student. And I really loved the diversity of the classroom experience here. Because even as a TA, I was working at, a large, university, and the students are still that sort of elite segment of students that have the ability to perform at a high level and get accepted to a major institution. So the students I dealt with there it was a very homogeneous kind of group. That is the opposite of what we experience here at TCC. Mm-hmm. It's the most heterogeneous population you can imagine, young and old and educated and, new to the higher education experience. Every possible discipline. I quickly discovered that nursing students were among the most diligent students you could possibly have in a class, so I loved the nursing students. And I liked the feeling at TCC. I guess then it was TJC. Mm-hmm.
Someday there won't be people around that remember TJC.
Yeah, I am getting pretty old.
Well, my brother went to TJC.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, he attended TJC.
too. Yep.
And I drove, I took different classes, but he went to TJC for a full 2 years.
Well, if you go to the PACE, it still says TJC.
Yeah, and somebody asked me if we would be changing that, and I said never. Never. I mean,
right.
Why would you?
It's a vestige of our history.
It is.
Exactly.
It absolutely is. And so, anyway, so you teach, but in addition to your teaching career here at Tulsa Community College, you're also really involved in the sustainability movement. Yeah. And talk to us about what we have accomplished, because we have accomplished some things in that area, and we have some more accomplishments coming down the pipeline. Yeah, well, this is a huge area for every institution in the country, but especially higher education. I really think this is we need to be leaders in the community. So as far as accomplishments go, I know that we've worked quite a bit with people like Stephen Cox and Key Moss
dealing with our facilities and our buildings to make them more efficient. And some of this happened even before I came on, but we're continuing to work on that. This year we've implemented an increased and enhanced recycling collection program. But there's really a lot more that needs to be done as far as sustainability. I mean, in every aspect of what the college does, my biggest concern for sustainability is a cultural transformation. It's a huge problem and challenge, maybe not a problem, but a challenge in Oklahoma, because many people shy away from the notion of sustainability, and it feels like something that has some type of political agenda. But the reality is it's really about preserving resources and making ourselves viable for the future. And so the challenge that we have is communicating that message as a kind of universal value rather than as a political ideology. And I think the most effective place that needs to really begin to take place is in the classroom. So my push right now, and working with my colleagues and people working in sustainability, is to try and push the agenda of incorporating sustainability concepts into virtually every academic discipline. And it probably seems like a natural fit for some things, like we've been working with the science faculty, and that makes sense because the environment and all of the sort of relationships between ecosystems and the climate and all of these things are the natural part of their discourse. But it's actually something that has a fit virtually everywhere, and we haven't really been able to fully implement a kind of faculty development program that will allow people who are not in those STEM type disciplines to understand how they too can buy into the sustainability process. So that's something that we on the sustainability committee are going to be working on, and I'm sure we're going to be bringing it to you to help
push it forward.
Yeah, give
You
this
bet.
an endorsement and help to understand the importance of that process. So a couple of other things that we've done. One thing that I'm particularly proud of is our annual sustainability conference, bringing guest speakers, people who are national and sometimes internationally known, to Tulsa to talk about all of these varying aspects of sustainability as a primary concern for higher education, especially in a community college, which is tied to the community. So what we do in higher ed has far-reaching effects outside of the walls of the institution.
We just have a minute or so left to wrap up, but we want to ask you what we call the big question that we ask of everybody, which is if you could go back in time and give your 18-year-old college-bound self some advice, what would that be?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I know you asked this question, so I was anticipating being asked it. And there's two answers that I would give. One is, if I was going to be talking to myself when I was 18, I would say two things: don't waste time, and don't worry so much. Things have a way of taking care of themselves as long as you're working towards something meaningful. But what I tell other 18-year-olds, because I have two children who are now both graduated from college, but before they went to school, the thing that I told them that I thought was most important was get to know your faculty and look for mentors. Because what I learned as a student was that individual faculty members made a huge difference in my life. And because I got to know them and they got to know me, we were able to develop this kind of collegial relationship that helped me to advance not just as a professional, but really as a person. And that is really incredibly valuable. So looking for mentors is really important.
Well, Dr. Rob Katz,
Great
thanks for that
advice.
advice, and thanks for talking with us today. And thank you for listening. Remember, you can listen to the podcast each week in the week at TCC and on the Creativity channel on YouTube, and we will be here next time. Thanks. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.